Joined by Cass Sunstein, Harvard law professor, author of Impeachment, A Citizen's Guide, and Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. And Jill, let me start with you as someone who was on that Watergate team. A lot of parallels, right, to the production of the infamous Nixon tapes, the fact that they wanted to release a transcript to someone else, eventually got shaken out of them. How are you viewing the somewhat remarkable disclosures that we've seen shaken loose from this White House in the last 24 hours?
Well, I'm working on a book now, and I've recently been paying a lot of attention to exact comments by Richard Nixon. And when he released what became the smoking gun tape, he said, "It's really not so bad," which sounds exactly like what Donald Trump is saying. This was a beautiful conversation, a perfect conversation. It isn't. This conversation is a smoking gun. It clearly links him to asking for something that is illegal to ask for, that is the help of a foreign government for his campaign. So that's one of the things that is very significant today. Anybody who reads that cannot help but conclude that he has done something that endangers our national security, endangers the security of an ally of ours against his favorite person, against Russia.
You mentioned the possible illegality of what's asked for here, and Cass, there's reporting tonight about the Washington Post about actually there being a criminal referral about the possibility of some kind of criminal conduct here that DOJ ultimately decided was not criminal. But I've been thinking a lot about a conversation we had about a month ago about impeachment when you made the case that, look, some crimes aren't impeachable and some things that are impeachable aren't crimes. How do you think about what's represented in this conversation, more broadly, the story we're learning in that framework?
Well, it's clear that the impeachable offenses aren't limited to criminal activity. It's abuses of the public trust, as Alexander Hamilton put it. So an egregious misuse or abuse of presidential authority would be an impeachable offense, even if it's not criminal. If the president suppressed civil liberties or decided to go on vacation for 8 months or enlisted foreign help in ensuring his reelection, all of those would be egregious betrayals of public trust. Whether or not they're crimes, they would be impeachable offenses.
There's also here, Jill, and this is also something I think that echoes Watergate, is so much of the president's misconduct has been out in the open. Russia, if you're listening, et cetera. Here, he got caught doing something in secret, and it seems there's still more things to learn, which seems to me part of what is making this different, perhaps, than previous things we've seen with this president. What do you think of that?
Well, I have pages of questions and witnesses that I would like to find out about that could really fill in the context of this particular violation, which is egregious. But there's also everything else that he's done. And while I urge that we focus now on something, because nothing has stuck to him, because there's so many differences every day, he does something different that's bad. And so nothing sticks. So you do need to focus. Yeah. But on the other hand, in Watergate, there was a context to all this. And we have a pattern of misbehavior here by President Trump, as we did with Richard Nixon. It wasn't just the break-in and the cover-up. It was many other things as well. It was campaign violations. It was contempt of Congress. It was abuse of power. We have all of those things here. And so there may need to be at least three pots of evidence that get looked at and reviewed, not just this one. But this one is big. It seems to have caught the public attention because they can understand and because it affects the upcoming election. We're not looking back anymore. We're looking toward, is this election safe, or is the president going to use foreign powers to help him win?
Of course, the next piece of information that will, I think, come out as a whistleblower campaign, I just want to read Elise Stefanik, who's a freshman rep from New York, a Republican, who saw it and said, "I do not support impeachment of President Trump." And she goes on to say, "I've just read the whistleblower complaint made available. I believe strongly in transparency. It should be immediately declassified and made public for the American people to read." And that's that. Cass, one thing that struck me about this exchange, and you worked in the Obama administration and your wife worked as the UN ambassador, and you've been on sort of the inside of how policy gets made. There is not a single discussion of U.S. policy in this phone call. Nothing. There's nothing about the national interest. There's nothing about U.S. policy. This is like Donald Trump, real estate mogul, trying to make some kind of deal to benefit himself.
Well, I'd want to be a little careful. You're right, but I want to be a little careful here. So misbehavior on the part of the president or future threats are not impeachable. It's very important to go behind a veil of ignorance and think, if I love this guy, would I think this is impeachable? For the president to have a conversation with a foreign leader that doesn't deal with foreign policy, but basically congratulations,
sure,
that's completely fine. If there are things that are kind of untoward or inappropriate, that's also fine in the sense that it doesn't amount to a high crime or misdemeanor. So the gravity of what we're now involved in and the majesty really of it, which goes back to the American founding and even the revolution itself, I think warrants a focus on what is specifically the concern here. And to focus on one thing alone is really a good idea. That is engagement with a foreign leader to get investigation of a political opponent. That is doubly harmful from the constitutional point of view. First, it's interference with our capacity for self-government. And second, it's an interference with the liberty of an American citizen, that is former Vice President Biden and his son. And so those are two problems, and they're extremely specific problems. It's not about patterns of misbehavior. It's not about, climate change or disliking 90% of what President Trump believes in. Those are part of legitimate democratic processes. We have two specific things which are warranting an impeachment inquiry.
That's really succinctly and well said. Cass Sunstein, thank you very much. Jill Wine-Banks, you as well. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.